Lots of Southern California folks joining us today in the chat. My stomping grounds. Nice to have you all. Perfect. Well, why don't we go ahead and roll in to our webinar today. So welcome everybody once again. This is our Designing for Literacy Development in the Hybrid setting. This is session 4 of our series, and today we're going to be exploring concepts around executive function. So while we are getting set up and everybody's getting oriented to their learning environment today, we want to encourage you to definitely utilize the chat. Sometimes webinars can be limiting in terms of participation, but the chat is going to be one of our main features. So please make sure that you introduce yourself. We encourage you to ask questions, sharing ideas, as well as putting hyperlinks in there is a great way to share your resources and ideas. So in addition to myself and my co-presenter, we'll introduce ourselves in just a minute. You also need to know that we've got a whole crew of people staffing the back channels. And so we've got links that'll be posted. People will be available to answer your questions in the comments as we move through the process today. So please, please, please utilize that chat feature. We love to hear from you. And then the other thing to remember as we move through this process is if you are responding to a chat, you want to make sure that you are selecting all panelists and attendees. If you want to share your resource with everybody that's attending today, you can also have the option of just sharing the information with the panelists here. So we just wanted to point out that option as we move through our learning session today. So if you joined us last time, we got to meet. I was very excited to join you in the first kind of new activity in my new role. So my name is Shamryn Coyle. I am the director of the California Coalition for Inclusive Literacy. And prior to taking on this role, I have served as a site administrator. I've served as an English language specialist. I've served as a bilingual teacher. So I come with lots of wealth and ideas, and I would say the thing that I'm most proud of and what I still connect most to in the work that I do are the relationships and the connections that I make with other people. So I'm really excited to introduce and have my co-presenter introduce herself today. So why don't you take it away, Becky?
Oh, thank you, Shamryn. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Becky Canham, and I am one of the implementation specialists for the California Coalition for Inclusive Literacy. This is my very first official task as an implementation specialist. I recently left Los Angeles Unified, where I began my career as an elementary school teacher many, many years ago. Most recently, I was an elementary school principal, which was a challenging but very rewarding job. Prior to that, I worked in the literacy department, supporting literacy instruction and literacy initiatives across the district. I'm very passionate about the importance and power of literacy, and I'm really excited for this new opportunity to grow my knowledge in literacy through the lenses of inclusion and universal design for learning. So I really look forward to more opportunities to work with you and other educators across California to do some of this work together and grow our knowledge together. So again, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
It's been so great to have you on board, Becky. And I also want to point out some folks in the back channels. We have some of our colleagues. Jennifer Levine is back there responding to chat. We also have Elise Yerkey with us, and she is an implementation specialist as part of our team. And then we also have Elisa Torres-Barton joining us, and she's also one of our implementation specialists. So you will be meeting them later in probably more of a live capacity as we continue our work together in the future. And I also want to take a moment and say thank you. We are live captioning our event this evening, and so I would like to send my appreciation and thanks to Carla, who is our captioner this evening. So the next piece of information is just to get you oriented to our learning environment this evening. As much as we try to engage you In a webinar, we're a little bit limited, so we wanted to take you on a quick walk of the features that we have. All of these links are being thrown up in the chat for you by Elise, and so there are live links. So you will, in your home-based document here, you'll have access to the entire slide deck that has been developed and presented so far for our work together. And so in addition to that home-based document, I'm actually going to take you to show you what some of these look like. So you'll have access to the home-based document there. And then based on the feedback that we got from our previous webinar, we were also able to take your really great feedback and develop a note-taking guide. So if you click on the note-taking guide, it will prompt you to make a copy, and it will think for a minute. And so this is just a document that we created. It's an outline of what we have prepared for our learning experience this evening. We invite you to use it if it's helpful for organizing your thoughts and taking notes. And then in addition to those documents, as we move through the evening, we will be providing opportunities for you to share your ideas and resources and thinking on some live discussion boards. And so that is an orientation to the tools that we'll be using this evening. Again, they're all available for you on the home-based document, and then they will continue to be posted in the chat. So if anything comes up as we move through our session this evening, please know that there's lots of help for you available in the chat. Okay, here we go.
All right, so if you're like me, I wasn't very familiar with the term executive function. When I saw this as the topic for our first webinar, it took me a minute because again, it's not something that my work had really involved. I hadn't been to PDs around it. It hadn't been a topic that I presented on either. So we wanted to start with this warm-up activity or an inclusion activity to kind of make that connection between what you probably already know about executive function, but may not be able to verbalize yet, and just showing you that this is a topic that you do already have a lot of understanding and expertise about. So we're going to start with a scenario. So ideally, we want our Sunday mornings to be relaxing and peaceful, but we know that's not the reality of our lives. So bear with me as I talk you through a scenario of what is probably more of a typical Sunday. So it's a Sunday morning. You've sat down to create a list of tasks, some that you need to finish or accomplish that day, some that you might be able to put off for a couple of days. So on your list, you've written down grocery shopping and lesson planning for the upcoming week. Your school has scheduled a school family night for the following month, and you'd like to get a head start and plan out your activity for the families. You'd like to do some self-care. Your week was a little bit stressful, so you'd like to try to fit in some exercise or meditation, some time with the family. There's some chores that you also should get done. Organizing the closet, the car needs an oil change, cleaning the bathrooms. Last night, your oldest daughter told you that her AP exam was coming up this next week and she is not ready. As you're finalizing your list, you smell smoke and you hear the fire alarm coming from your kitchen where breakfast is being cooked.
That makes me want to crawl back into bed.
Exactly. So take a moment and just kind of think about and brainstorm, how would you tackle this list of tasks?
What's the first thing that comes to mind? What do you do? What are your thinking processes? We invite you to take a minute, and then we'd love to see kind of what your first maybe stab at it was. If you want to add any comments in the chat, we'd be curious to see what your approach would be to tackling this day.
Fire emergencies come first, yes. Definitely. Definitely. You see some task avoidance based on probably personal preferences. Yes. Coffee is first. I agree with that one.
Oh, yes, Brett. Definitely having coffee. Wonderful.
Watch Netflix and avoid it all.
Love it. Love it.
So as you're...
Go ahead, Becky.
That's okay. Next slide, please, Shamryn. As you're kind of going through this, thinking out, some people gave us exactly what they would do. Some of you already started kind of thinking about what are those thinking skills? What are those self-management skills that you would need to accomplish the tasks in this scenario? If you could drop that in the chat box, please.
Let's see, I'm trying to think. I needed to organize, prioritizing.
Yeah, I see prioritizing. We saw that a couple of times earlier. Prioritize and delegate.
Oh, I love the idea of delegation. I hadn't thought of that before.
An idea where we need to be at the end of the day. Figuring out when things must be done before negative consequence happens.
Oh, I love that idea of emotional regulation.
Emotional regulation. Yeah, exactly.
That's
so
awesome.
These skills, or these self-management skills, these are our executive function skills, really being able to have a goal, set a plan, and execute that plan for a productive outcome. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, specifically in terms of literacy in a hybrid setting.
I think as adults, we take those abilities for granted, that especially as educators, when we're managing so many different plates and all of those different types of settings, it's something that we really, at least sometimes for me, I definitely take that for granted. So for today, we are going to be looking specifically at executive function, as we've been talking about, and participants will develop a working understanding of executive function and exactly kind of how it might impact literacy learning. Participants will also have opportunities to explore design considerations to support executive function in the hybrid setting. And so we'll be looking at this from 3 different lenses. We'll be brainstorming and sharing ideas and resources around planning and strategy development, which has to do with our working memory part of our brain. And then also managing information and resources, which is flexible thinking. I know that I often need help in this area personally. And then our ability to monitor our progress and make sure that we're really staying focused on what it is we're trying to accomplish, that we're understanding what we're doing, and then that element of self-control. And I know sometimes in the conversations that we have with educators, and specifically in talking to people right now, as we lead into this executive function topic, one thing that a popular topic or visual that comes to mind is that squirmy, wiggly kid that can't sit still, that really struggles to pay attention. And there are actually things that we can do as teachers and educators and designers to account for that before we go into the lesson. And so I invite you, as we go into this process, to again put your designer hat on and think about what you can do proactively ahead of time in your lesson design to support these elements as we move through instruction. So in order to build some background knowledge, we wanted to just give you a small little snippet, a kind of a working definition of what we'll be playing with today in terms of our work with executive function.
Executive function is the brain's air traffic controller. It intercepts a tangle of inbound thoughts and impulses and steers them towards productive outcomes. Executive function helps students stay focused, plan ahead and set goals, regulate emotions, monitor their own learning, and think flexibly, creatively. But children aren't born with executive functions. They develop over time. In fact, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain which houses executive function, is still maturing well into our teens and 20s. So teaching executive function skills should start early, be reinforced regularly, and continue up through high school.
That concept of it being introduced and reinforced early and often really comes to mind for me for this particularly. I think of a teenager that lives in my house, how I've seen his executive function kind of come and go over the years. And so for our purposes today, we're not going to watch that again, but we will go on just to that working definition. So again, to go back to our working definition of what we'll be working with today is executive function is there to help us develop and act on plans to make the most out of our learning, or to take it back to our Sunday morning scenario, to make the most out of the day that we have to get ready. And then it helps us stay focused. Executive function skills help us plan ahead and regulate our emotions, monitor learning, and think flexibly. And, you know, in preparation for our time today, we've been really reflecting. We've been in this pivot for a year. And it was almost exactly a year ago that we pulled the plug and walked away from our respective school sites in the traditional setting. And we've come a long way, and there's a lot of positive things and a lot that we've learned in the work that we've done in this pivot of being responsive and having to teach in a pandemic. And these pictures that we put in the PowerPoint, and I don't know how well you folks can see them at home on your screen, but this one has really struck me. We've got a student concentrating in one place, another one concentrating here, and then in the background, we have what could be a sibling or a family member standing on their head. I just think that's probably a typical scenario for many of our families. And so I just really want to, you know, appreciate everything that we have done as educators to provide support for our students, but also how much our students and families and caregivers have been able to pivot and do their best in order to support this learning. So that will take us into our problem of practice, our problem of practice today. And in preparation for these webinars, all of us on the team have reached out to educators, and you know, we did some action research to really find out what are some great spots where you've been successful, and what are some places in this hybrid setting that have been a little bit more challenging for you. And so the first problem of practice has to do with specifically supporting the writing process in the hybrid setting. So if we look at a quote from one of our educators, she says, "I love teaching writing. In the classroom, I can guide learners through the writing process easily. I have systems built into my instruction to support the time needed to really work through the writing process with students. With students working from home, I've struggled to support them in their writing process with planning and time management." So what can we do as designers to really support their work in this area?
So we're going to ask you to really think about this problem in practice. Learners struggle with planning and time management, and think about it, like Shamryn said earlier, as a designer. So educators can design to support planning and time management. We can really set up the learning experience to provide support for our learners to become independent planners and able to effectively time manage to accomplish their tasks, to go through the entire writing process and have a complete and final product.
That makes me think of another conversation I had with a teacher recently, where they're engaged in the writing process, but what they're finding is students aren't necessarily managing their time. So she'll work with a group of students on their piece of writing, and when they come back together again to check on it and get feedback, a lot of times those students haven't done much work on that. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go into our designer question, which is, how will my hybrid literacy design support learners with planning and time management? So at this point, we are going to invite you to explore what are we calling them?
Our discussion boards.
Thank you. We're inviting you to join our discussion boards. We have a variety across the grade levels, so you can access one of the links and share your ideas. You can put live links, you can share resources, you can put questions and thoughts. We also invite you, if you just want to kind of sit back and watch the waterfall of ideas come into play, but you'll have lots of options in terms of how you want to engage with creating content for us this evening, because I really do think that the experts are in the room. If you also prefer, you can also put your ideas and resources in the chat. So again, here are the links to the discussion boards. Elise is doing a fabulous job of throwing them into the chat boxes for everybody to access, and you will also be able to find these on our home base document.
Shamryn, I just wanted to let everyone know that by suggestion, by demand, we added a higher education link too. So that's, you won't see that in the slides that Shamryn is showing, but it is in the chat.
Oh, thank you for
Great.
that. Way to be responsive to that. So we'll go ahead and invite you into those documents, and we will check back with you in 5 minutes. We're winding down towards the end. I'm gonna stop our timer so that scary siren sound doesn't go off from
Great.
the floor. That startled me. We'll invite you to finish off your final thoughts. It's great to see what other people are doing and things that people have come up with to support that planning and time management piece.
Yeah, as I was going through, I saw some really great ideas. I saw a lot of ideas around scheduling, being very specific with schedules, including links for all activities or all tasks, reinforcing schedules, starting with a morning meeting to go through the schedule, also supporting students with visual schedules, color-coded schedules, using some of our digital tools in Google Classroom to really help students organize their day and their time for planning. Chunking assignments into smaller tasks I saw, which I think is such a great idea and very important for many learners at all levels. Also using small group instruction as an opportunity to support students being more mindful about their own planning and time management. And I also wanted to highlight somebody mentioned eliciting family support, which I think is a great idea always, even when we're physically at school, but especially when we're in an environment where students spend some of their day at school and then the rest of their instructional day is at home. So thank you all for your great ideas. And I know Shamryn put it in the chat box, but I think it's a great idea to go back and take a look at the other grade levels as well. You'll have the opportunity to do that after our session together. We'll include all of those links for you.
Awesome. I saw one that really spoke to me is somebody said that they put an estimate of how much time people should be spending for each portion of the assignment. And the other place that my mind went as I got to explore a little bit were the implications for this beyond just writing and literacy. This is really a skill that will transfer into all the subject areas. So
yeah, this is a skill I'm still working on as in my professional life.
Exactly. And so this will move us into our second problem of practice. Why don't you take us there, Becky?
All right. So this problem of practice also is around the area of writing. But again, just like Shamryn said, we're thinking about how executive function supports our learners in all areas. So even though this is specifically about writing, you'll see the importance and value of focusing on organization across the content areas. So something that many of my teachers had spoken about, and when we reached out to get some feedback, something that came up a lot was really about students having a hard time organizing not only the information, but materials when writing. So in this particular case, the teacher felt that she was very supportive in the physical classroom of her students being organized in the area of writing. The students had writing notebooks, folders. The teacher held writing workshop sessions to guide the students through the process of writing. But when they transitioned to the hybrid setting, students really struggled to manage not only the projects, but the materials themselves. So her question was, how can I build in more options to support organization for students?
This one really speaks to me personally, as especially in the hybrid setting and how easy it is that we have the World Wide Web at our fingertips. And so if I'm working on a writing assignment or any assignment for that matter, and something catches my interest, how easy it is for me to stray away and go down what I call the rabbit hole effect of looking at a link or digging deeper and then forgetting my purpose and forgetting all of the resources that I have at my disposal. So I'm really excited and curious about how we can better support this process for our learners. And so in this new hybrid model, learners struggle with organization of materials and information. Again, in that physical classroom, it's easy for us to support that. And we have entire school systems that do. AVID is a well-known program across our schools that really supports organization here. So as educators, how can we design to support organization of materials and information in this setting so that students maybe don't go down that rabbit hole of effect as they're working on a project across all subject matters. And so we will invite our participants again to go to our, I always forget what we call them, Becky.
Discussion boards.
Discussion boards. One of those words that can't stick in my brain. So we're going to be specifically looking at design elements for organization of materials and information in the hybrid model, knowing that we've got bits and pieces of physical things that we can provide support for students, as well as things in the virtual realm. And I'll give you a reminder as you go into those discussion boards, you'll be going to problem of practice number 2 for this one. So in our task is, again, we're looking at how do we support our learners in organization of materials and information to support their learning. And so we'll take us into our discussion boards. And again, we've added one for higher education. Thank you for being so responsive in the back channels team. It's wonderful to have that right there at our fingertips. And we will begin our next brainstorming session. We'll see you back in 5. Wonderful. I'm going to pause us just shy of that 5 minutes again to avoid the terrible sound at the end. That's awesome. Webinars are so strange. We know you're out there because we see you typing, and it's so hard for us to not see the faces to engage, but it's been great to go into those documents and see the ideas that have. One of the phrases that one that I read that really popped out to me is, now might not be the time to go green, but actually providing those hard paper copies and the physical actual materials of it really spoke to me.
Yeah, I also highlighted that same idea, and I saw a lot of ideas around really how do we organize information and being really explicit when we teach students to do it, and providing lots of different ways. I saw note-taking guides, graphic organizers, 3-column notes, T-charts, different ways to support students with organizing information and giving those options. So eventually they'll take over ownership of that organization. And then kind of the same idea in terms of organizing materials, also providing explicit direct instruction, eventually gradual release model, because we want students, again, to be able to do this independently, but really providing those that model around organizing information, materials. So I saw lots of things around notebooks, binders, folders, and one idea I thought was really important is providing that time at the end of whether it's every day, every lesson, to stop and give some time for your learners to organize, to put those materials away. I thought was a really a great strategy to support our learners' organization.
Yeah, another one that really spoke to me, I think somebody put a note about embedding those additional resources into your explicit instruction. So if you're going to show a video, show the video as part of your instruction and don't put it at the end as a kind of a follow-up activity. I thought that was really a great insight there. So thank you for all of those great, it really takes me, the expertise is in the room, and sometimes we just need the space and the time to kind of consider these problems of practice, but also all of the strengths and the wonderful things that we have learned on a dime and have been able to kind of pivot and do. But keeping in mind, to go back to our video at the beginning of our session, that executive function is something that needs to be taught, and it develops over time. And it's something that we as adults take for granted. And I think it takes me back to one of my favorite phrases that I use in my work is, you have to go slow to go fast. And so you have to have that part of your brain really primed and organized and intentional to really go as far as you want to go or need to go in the work that we're doing. So that will take us to, I keep doing the same thing there. We're not going to start 5 minutes again on that one, but it's going to take us to our final problem of practice of the day. And this one really spoke to me as a teacher, as a learner, and we're going to be looking at executive function in the terms of self-monitoring while we're reading. And in the classroom setting and the teachers that we spoke to, this was really a common thread. In the physical classroom, across the board, in all educational settings, teachers really had a great sense of pride in terms of how they worked to build a community of readers. And that applied across the board in all subject matters and all settings. And so teachers shared with us and they said, I love to build a community of readers in the physical classroom. I have multiple options for reading spots set aside and time set aside for independent reading. And I'm able to meet with learners to discuss their reading progress regularly. During remote learning and without those physical classroom supports, I see my students struggling to self-monitor while they're reading. How can I support students with decoding and meaning making when reading and engaging with new information in the hybrid setting? And for me, this crosses over deeply into all of the subject matters. How are they self-monitoring to know that they understand what a word problem is asking? How are they self-monitoring to know what the science lesson is that they're reading? And so this portion of being aware, okay, I'm reading, and am I really processing and understanding what I'm reading? And what is my goal for reading are pieces of that puzzle that I think we really need to consider. And this reminds me, you know, reading requires a lot of effort. You have to decode, you have to concentrate, and when we're in the home setting, students might not have a quiet place to go. It reminds me of one of the stories that you told about a student that accessed and logged into their Google Classroom in their closet.
Yeah, every time I visited a particular teacher's classroom or Zoom classroom, one of her second graders would be in a closet. You would see the bottom of the coats and the sleeves right above her head because that was the only place where she could get internet, where the hotspot would work in her family's apartment. But she was resilient and creative and found a way to make it work.
I love that. So not only are we asking them to monitor their progress in what it is they're concentrating on, we're asking them to find a place in their home and in their space and in their life that has as few distractions as possible so they can actually concentrate on these tasks. The big ask sometimes, and you know, I've been really inspired by what we've seen come out from what our teachers have been designing and what our students and families have been able to come up with.
Yeah, it is definitely a big ask. Monitoring reading is a really difficult skill to teach. It's a very complex process that's happening in our brains while we're reading. So, and we know the challenges added in a hybrid model, you know, have made it even more difficult. So we really want to think about this third problem of practice. In this new hybrid model, learners struggle to monitor progress. But how can we as educators design to support learners monitoring their own progress? How can we really provide opportunities and strategies for students to understand or to recognize when they've lost meaning in a text, or recognize when they don't understand what a word means? And then once they have that understanding that they have lost meaning, how can we support them with problem solving? So again, really thinking about how as educators can we design to support learners with monitoring their own progress.
So what I really hear you saying, Becky, is there's a lot of thinking that's going involved into self-assessment and self-reflection and, you know, questioning techniques. Am I, you know, is there mastery-oriented feedback? Is the reader pausing every once in a while to see if they're understanding what they're reading? Such important processes. So we'll take you into our next design, which is how will my hybrid literacy design support learners with monitoring progress? And this is really on their own, outside of that classroom where we can actually physically look at them and work those processes and structures into our classroom. We haven't been able to do that quite as well in the hybrid setting. So I'm really curious to see what our experts in the room have come up with. So we will invite you again to go to our discussion board documents. I remembered it this time. and we will give you, again, 5 minutes to share your expertise, ideas. And don't forget questions. This is a difficult topic for us, and sometimes it takes a minute to organize our thinking before we have something to write down. And I really want to encourage you to include your questions on this, because we also go back and look at these discussion boards to inform our design for our next professional development and webinar series. So we'll see you on the back side of 5. Okay, I'm gonna bring us back again and close out that final discussion board activity. Again, lots of really great ideas. What did you see that spoke to you, Becky?
You know, I saw lots of ideas around self-reflection, self-assessment, providing checklists so students really understand where they need to be, what they should be doing, what the expectations are, but providing lots of opportunity for them to check in with themselves or with a reading or writing buddy. Lots of opportunities to rate themselves, rate their understanding, lots of opportunities to check in with the teacher as well. Something I saw across multiple grade level spans was really that idea about making the task of reading visible for your learners. So in terms of think alouds, so really modeling what do proficient readers do when they get stuck on a word they don't know? What do they do when they lost meaning? So really showing that invisible work that's going on in our heads while we're reading, but really making it explicit for our learners so they can better problem solve while they're reading, so they can really understand. Not only is it important just to monitor and figure out where they're stuck, but what to do when they're stuck.
I love that concept of problem solving while we're reading. That's a really great way to capture it. So this will move us towards the end of our session this evening. So just to recap, we were looking at design elements to support executive function, and we brainstormed strategies and provided resources for one another to support planning and time management. We looked at ways that we can facilitate managing information and resources. And then we were also looking at how we can enhance the capacity for monitoring progress for all of our learners in this hybrid setting. Love this quote. Talk to us about this, Becky. I love it.
All right, so we wanted to end our time together with a quote. So I found a quote from one of my very favorite educators, Cornelius Minor. "We don't advocate for literacy because we want kids to read books. We advocate for literacy because we want full personhood." I just want to, we want to end our time really thinking about this. What is the power of literacy for our learners? You know, again, it's not just about reading books or being able to sound out those words, although we do want our kids to read books, but that's not just what it's about. We really want to think about our learners becoming literate. And why is that so important?
I agree. It's all access and inclusion and being able to be a fully participating person in the world and have so many great resources to have access to. So that was a really powerful quote for me. I'm really glad that you were able to find that. So as we close out our session, we will be meeting again on the 12th of April for our next webinar session, and it'll be about building comprehension. And like we talked about earlier, we really take your feedback and your comments and questions very seriously. It will absolutely help us in terms of the content of the design for the webinar, as well as the format. We're really working hard to come up with some innovative ways to make sure that folks can engage in this process in a way that's most meaningful and effective to them, given that there's some limitations to a webinar. But we really want to encourage you and would greatly, greatly appreciate it if you would access the bit.ly and provide some feedback for us moving forward in preparation for this webinar, as well as for others. If you have other ideas and other formats that you would enjoy participating in and engaging in content related to literacy and inclusion, let us know. We are primed and ready to be responsive to your needs. So again, we thank you so very much for being here. We thank our back channel participants and all of our members of our CAF team and colleagues in the background as well. And thank you all for spending your Monday afternoon with us. We know that you're busy, and we really appreciate that you take the time to continue to engage in your own learning. And so I want to honor that as well.
Thank you all so much. And please don't forget to go back and take a look at those discussion boards from the other grade levels. There's so many great and practical ideas on there.
And we'd love to hear from you. So questions, email us, reach out. We're here to support your work. And we're grateful that you were all here with us this evening.
Mhm.